Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. If you're here, that means you survived this insane weekend, and you're still solvent, we're still solvent, we're all still here. Thank God. So anyway, with me today is Burt Rock of Quinta. Hello, Burt. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you today?
Pretty good. I mean, it was, as I said, it was a crazy ass weekend. So
Oh yeah.
glad it turned out okay. We weren't really sure where that was going, right? I mean, did you think it was going to go south, or did you think we were going to basically be okay?
There were moments where I had my doubts. I will say I took a mega long on USDC at one point, so
Yeah.
I was fairly confident, but
Yeah.
it could have gone really south. I started feeling a lot better once more news came out about exactly how this was going to play out and with kind of the government response. But it was a harrowing weekend. It was a lot.
It really was. I mean, I don't think we really knew if we were going to live or die. I mean, that was kind of the long and short of it. I mean, it was entirely possible if the federal government might have said, "Yeah, we're not going to bail that bank out."
Yeah, I'll say this is the first time that I've ever spent a whole weekend trading a stablecoin. So what a
Yeah, that was
what a day.
insane. Who knew that Tether was the safe bet and USDC because it was backed by a bank was going to be the risky bet, right? Like, I don't think that was on anyone's bingo card, but
No.
yeah, big winners were Tether and Binance basically. So yeah, crazy weekend. So we're going to talk today about Quenta, which is your thing, and it is a perpetual exchange on Optimism. So first, just a quick note about what's a perp exchange. Well, basically, it's a place where you can use stablecoins as collateral to lever up on a position. So in Quenta, it's 25x. I've seen as high as 120x. And basically, what happens is you borrow, and you borrow like the 120x or whatever it is leverage. And if the price moves against you, right? So it's like you're trading 120x of those coins. So whatever you put in, it's multiplied. The effects of wherever the market moves are multiplied 120 times, right?
Yeah.
If that is what your leverage is. So if the price moves against you, like even just a little bit, you get liquidated. Which let's be honest, that happens like 90% of the time. But that one time you get it right, you do insanely well, right? So it's like crazy lottery time, right? And the invention of perpetual futures, you can't do it with anything other than crypto. And I can't remember why that is. Do you know why that is? I know that it's a specifically crypto invention, right?
It is. So it's not a crypto invention necessarily. It's something that was written about before crypto, but I believe it was Arthur Hayes Exchange
Yep.
that first actually put perpetual futures on the market. So it's really become big in crypto. I can't really speak to exactly why it's not popular in TradFi. Everything in TradFi has an actual expiration date on it. You don't really have to worry about that with crypto. And of course, with our exchange, we're doing specifically synthetic perpetual futures, which is very crypto specific. Synthetic just means there's no underlying asset being traded at all anywhere. It's just purely backed by other collateral.
Yeah, and that is amazing, and I want to hear more about that because I'm very curious about how you're doing it. I'm very familiar with like the GMX model of doing things, but I'm not at all familiar with how the synthetics world operates and how you do things. So I'm very excited to talk about that. The other thing I just want to note before we get into that, though, you used to not be able to do perpetual stuff on a DEX. You could only do it on a centralized exchange, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody thought, and I thought that it was impossible. There was no way to do it on a DEX until GMX came along and cracked it. And ever since that sort of aha moment, we've seen a bunch of innovation in DEXs providing synthetics, just perpetual exchange stuff, right? So, including yourself, and you are yet another innovation on that. But you are based on top of synthetics, right? So you're like, these DeFi is very stackable and composable. You're a layer that sits on top of synthetics. So let's talk about synthetics first. Tell me a little bit about what that is and how that works.
Yeah, and I also have a long history with synthetics. It's kind of how I got into Quinta in the first place, and I've sat on their governance a little bit, so I'm pretty familiar with this. But if you kind of go back to the original idea of what synthetics was, this is actually part of how GMX got the idea for their exchange. It's based on the original synthetics model, and essentially what it is you put a bunch of crypto collateral into a pool. and then you mint debt against that. So what that means is minting SUSD in our case. And this SUSD is backed actually right now 500% by collateral in the synthetics debt pool. So that's how the whole thing doesn't break, right? If the prices go down, unlike something like, what happened with Anchor and UST and all of this business, you can't back it 1-to-1. Bad things will happen. But if you over collateralize, it gives the system a little bit of time to manage liquidations. And so each unit of SUSD is actually representative of debt. And so if you trade this and you make money, the staker's debt goes up. They actually owe the money back to the protocol and can have their collateral liquidated if they don't pay it. So that's where your payment comes from. And then, of course, the opposite direction, they make money if you lose money. So the stakers with Quinta are actually hoping, the synthetic stakers are hoping that you neither make money or lose money in the aggregate. They're actually just hoping you pay a little bit of fee. That's
interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's really where like the perps v2, which is what we're currently built on, improves over GMX, right? If you're very familiar with GMX, you probably know there's a lot of concern over big traders. Who's the big guy, Andrew Kang, that was making the news a lot. Everybody was concerned about his big positions kind of taking GLP to zero. The beautiful thing about synthetics is that they've designed a system now where the perps exchange is actually sits at like 50-50. So there's traders on either side. So we don't really care whether or not Andrew Kang makes or loses money. We just care that there's fees being paid.
Yeah, so just let me explain that for people who don't know. So the GMX model is based on something called GLP, which is like the GMX liquidity pool, and that is basically the counterparty to all these degenerates that are taking out, on their system. I think it's 50x leverage is as high as you can go. Might be 30x. I can't recall the amount, but
I think it's 30x.
It might be 30x.
It might have gone up. And don't worry, we're going to raise ours very soon.
Yeah, okay.
So
I think that's okay. I mean, I actually think you want to remain kind of safe if you can. 120x just seems absolutely batshit. Even 30 or 50x is kind of crazy, but nonetheless, these people that are taking out these leveraged bets, most of the time they lose. So that is, and GLP is like the house that basically wins most of the time. So the entire system is solvent and in fact incredibly profitable so long as this keeps happening. Now, what you just referenced was a whale who came along and might have been good at actually manipulating the system. Well, not manipulating the system because they're not doing anything illegal, but they may have been making good bets with very large amounts of money, and they may hit that one jackpot which wipes out the entire GLP pool, and then the entire model falls apart. All you need is one. It just has to happen once, right? So very unlikely, but so is Silicon Valley Bank failing, right?
Unlikely, but it is a risk.
Yeah. So what you've just said is that your system, it's not as it's not as dependent on everyone losing in large amounts, right? You don't if it's more or less even winners to losers, you don't care. You're really interested in the fees that people pay for using the system. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So the whole system is based around the idea that the fees are the protocol's edge. So it's kind of at any one point, you flip a coin, it's 50-50 whether or not a trade goes in your direction or not. And we really don't want to encourage people to get liquidated, really, because nobody comes back to trade if they lose all their money.
Right.
So we just want to look at where is the edge, and that's in the fees. And how do you make sure to just collect that edge and not expose yourself to anything else? And we do that with this very clever funding rate and price impact mechanism, which, just to give kind of the broad overview, essentially, if a big whale takes one side of the trade, then it becomes very attractive to take the other side of the trade. You can go, some people are doing arbitrage and this kind of stuff, but what it results in is every time you get one person taking a big trade, the little fish swim in and take the other side until it's perfectly balanced. And what that allows, of course, is when you have lower risk, you can do things like add more assets and give more liquidity, which you made reference to kind of not being able to do perps on a DEX before. And one of the big issues with doing perps on a DEX, there are a lot of issues, but one of the big issues was liquidity. It's really hard to compete with the liquidity on centralized exchanges. So reducing your risk is one way where you can say, hey, we have practically no risk on these trades because there's always somebody else taking the risk for us. So we can expand liquidity to actually be competitive with a centralized exchange, which is pretty exciting to me.
That is pretty amazing. So getting back to synthetics for a second, because I want to understand this a little bit better. So you mentioned SUSD, which is a synthetic dollar stablecoin on the synthetic system. It's backed by a basket of crypto assets. So things like wrapped Bitcoin, I would guess, Ethereum, maybe not these assets specifically, but things like them. Ethereum, wrapped Bitcoin, I don't know, Uni, Sushi, whatever. And that basket is in aggregate 5 times larger than what the pool will lend out as SUSD. And if somebody, now you have to, do the users have to put up the assets? Do they have to put up 5x worth of assets? How does that work? Because I'm trying to figure out if the pool gets liquidated, who loses?
So it's just synthetic stakers. And so what we have right now is a system where it's mainly synthetics as collateral. Now, that's become a little less popular over time because what we found is you really want your collateral to have much, much better liquidity. So we've started adding Ethereum as collateral through wrappers where you actually put in Ethereum and you get wrapped Ethereum as out of the wrapper. And that actually helps the peg too. So it creates this arbitrage opportunity for people to mint versus burn their wrapped Ethereum, which keeps SUSD at exactly $1. And so right now, it's mainly the synthetics collateral, and that's who's kind of taking the risk. Is the
so when you say synthetics collateral, the SNX coin,
the SNX coin,
yeah, okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, the SNX coin is serving as collateral, and it's well over collateralized. This has been stress tested, obviously, through the last year, and it's performed very well. But partially just because this is always how the system was going to go, and partially because of everybody realizing how quickly volatility can happen and how extreme these things can get. The V3 system, which was actually just released, and we're kind of working on this long-term transition to
version 3.
Yes, synthetics V3. We all have to migrate over a period of months, so it's going to take a while, but the new system is actually much more like you've described. So under the new system, instead of just having the synthetic stakers take all of the risk, it's going to be a combination of synthetic stakers using their SNX collateral, in addition to liquidity providers bringing ETH, and then hypothetically, you can even bring something like Uni or wrapped Bitcoin, and we kind of isolate all the risk here by making it individual pools rather than a single pool. So if you don't want to be in a pool that has exposure to wrapped Ethereum, you don't need to, right? That's kind of the beauty of the V3 system. But in bringing in all this different collateral, you make the system a lot stronger, because then it's not just one thing that has to go to zero in order to destroy the system. It's kind of everything.
Right. So we've talked about SUSD. Now, there are when I went to the synthetic site, I noticed there was SBTC, SETH, and then there's a bunch of Forex stuff like, the Australian dollar, Swiss franc, Korean won, and all of those were synthetic assets also, correct? So those exist. And from what I've read, it's not like I can just go and define a new synthetic right now. Maybe in the future I'll be able to do that. But right now, it's only the synthetics that are offered by the synthetics system, and those are voted on by a DAO. Do I get that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the Synthetic Spartan Council that votes on these assets based on kind of a risk assessment. And all of these assets that are approved, the way it works is the same way that the perps work, where if you buy synthetic BTC and your synthetic BTC goes up $1,000, then the debt pool owes $1,000. Now, The difference here that's very important for synthetic stakers to understand, maybe not so much for users, but synthetic stakers need to know this. There's nobody taking the other side of that trade with these spot assets. And the way synthetic stakers kind of hedge this is we have a partner protocol called dhedge, and they've created a pool where essentially every time somebody buys SBTC, dhedge will go and buy WBTC, and you deposit your money there. And that makes sure that even if your debt goes up because somebody makes a lot of money, you always have the money to go pay that back. So that's kind of how that system has been balanced. And then obviously under V3, it becomes a little bit less of a concern because once your markets are isolated, we fully expect if you open this up to be permissionless and you let people create any market they want with any collateral they want, we fully expect somebody's going to get wrecked here. But what there'll be is, of course, a very tightly controlled synthetics Spartan pool. That's kind of the officially endorsed pool that's going to have the DAO voting on what goes in it and the composition. That way we have, people really paying attention to the risk involved. And then if you want to go create a degen pool, you'll be able to do that in isolation and you can get wrecked without hurting anybody else.
Right. So basically in order to mint SBTC, the pool will mint it for you, but if it goes up $1,000, the pool has already placed, I guess basically I'm not sure what we call a put or a strike. I never get these straight. They've basically taken the opposing position and hedged that bet. The pool has hedges always going on to make sure that it's never caught short. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the individual synthetic staker's responsibility to hedge, but we've just created these tools that make it very, very easy. So it is possible for a synthetic staker to get liquidated if they don't hedge. And we definitely saw this happen during the market downturn, where the other synthetic stakers will take on your debt and you have your synthetics distributed to them. Now, we don't want people getting liquidated, but the system is supposed to account for the fact that some people won't really manage their debt correctly. You can't force this on people. So, and you don't want to force people to hold WBTC. You want to give people the choice to hold whatever they want to hold and take whatever strategy they want. And so by kind of distributing this risk and making sure to socialize all these losses and provide some kind of incentives for the other stakers to take it on, we've watched people get liquidated in spectacular fashion and the whole system survives. But if you do take advantage of these tools that we provide as a synthetic staker, then you don't really have to worry about that. You'll always be able to cover your debt.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more now about Quenta. So this is a layer on top of synthetics. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me where that's going.
Yeah, so Quenta spun out actually fairly recently. I say a year, but it feels it's a year, but it feels very recent. Quenta was originally the kind of official owned by synthetics front end. Now, what the guys building Quenta, I wasn't part of it at the time that it spun out, but what the guys building Quenta found was that it was extremely limiting because your job is to kind of only build tools on top of synthetics and not really think about like the full trading experience, which is what Quenta is really focused on now. And of course, the synthetics guys found that it's a big hassle to deal with a front end. And what they want to be able to do is just be this deep pool of liquidity that anybody can plug into. So as we flash forward now, you actually have a lot of different people building on synthetics. I'll get into a little bit of it because we're partnered with several of them at Quenta. You have people building options on top. You have people building sports betting markets, all this interesting stuff. And when they can focus on being a back end, synthetics is able to really expand way beyond what they could when they were trying to handle their own front end. Now, from our perspective, Quenta takes this liquidity, and we have solved like the first problem that any perps exchange has when they launch, which is where are you going to get millions of dollars in liquidity for your users? We answered that very easily by going right to synthetics and saying, hey, let us use your liquidity. What we get is a kickback from synthetics, basically for every dollar in fees that gets paid, we're gonna get a 5 or 10 cent kickback. This isn't live yet, but it's already been passed, so we kind of know what this looks like already, and we've been working with them to kind of craft this incentive structure, which helps us go and market the product. Now, if you go to Quinta, what you're going to notice is, number one, you can trade perps, which are a synthetics product that we build the front end for. So the whole UI and everything that goes into building and maintaining a UI comes from us. Now, you'll also notice we have options that just went live. And so this is where we really get into, what are the needs of a trader and what unique thing can Quinta bring to synthetics perps rather than just a front end? Well, if you go to Robinhood, right? Robinhood doesn't just have stocks. Robinhood has, stocks and options, and you can get yield on your on your USD that's just sitting in the wallet. And so that's something that we decided was missing in DeFi. So we've kind of started taking the baby steps toward providing what should be an experience that can compete with a centralized exchange or even a TradFi exchange, but is in DeFi where you get to hold your own assets. And then the other thing that Quinta brings is, on top of this synthetics perps product, there's a lot of things that are great to have for traders that are missing in the contracts themselves. So if you go and just try to interact with the contracts, which you can do, you're going to notice there's no stop loss orders, there's no limit orders. You have to deposit and withdraw every time. And so this is something that Quinta is building our own contracts to handle. So under V1, we had this built already. You could place stop limit orders. You didn't have to worry about withdrawing from contracts. It was all handled for you by our front end. Under V2, that's probably because of, we have to wait for security audits.
Right.
But, we want everybody to be safe. So this whole thing's built, and we're waiting for the security audits, and then that should be done by probably the middle of April. I'm going to say 4 weeks, even though in crypto you never give timelines, because the minute you give a timeline, you're wrong and everybody hates you. But knowing that, I'm going to say about 4 weeks, all this stuff is going to be completely ready, and you'll be able to just have a much more seamless trading experience.
Now, since a lot of these things are based on stablecoins, and I'm guessing SUSD, what happens if the stablecoin depegs? Right, like we all thought a lot of stablecoins would that we thought would never depeg. We saw them depeg like crazy over this past weekend with the Silicon Valley Bank fiasco. What would happen if that were to happen in your system and the underlying synthetic system?
Well, that's an interesting question, because we have actually seen a depeg. Now, I'll preface this by saying, when I've seen a depeg in our system, it hasn't been a concern for the systemic health. It's more just kind of a user experience problem, right? What we've seen is so much demand for synthetic assets that it's tough to get all the liquidity, where eventually you run out of liquidity and then you see SUSD going for $1.01 or $1.02 or $1.03. I even see, when Lyra launched, I even saw it as high as $1.20. There was a lot of demand to get into Lyra. So that's obviously, nothing is going to break if SUSD goes to 120, but obviously it's a poor user experience. So we're really trying to make sure that we can come up with novel ways to increase liquidity. Adding more types of collateral is really the silver bullet for that. But as far as what it looks like when you're trading on the exchange, you really wouldn't notice. The way the synthetic system works is it assumes SUSD is $1 for the purposes of trading perps, only for the purposes of trading perps. So if BTC USD is 24,000 exactly, let's say, then a BTC perp on the Quinta exchange will always be 24,000 SUSD. Now, if SUSD goes to $1.20 or if it goes to 90 cents, it doesn't matter. If you have 24,000 SUSD, you can place a 1x order for one BTC perp. And it doesn't really matter to you until you try to exit the system. So that's really where depegging becomes a big issue, is when people are getting in and out of the system, they want to be able to redeem their SUSD for one
Or dollar.
USDC or one USDT or something like this. So as far as in the system, it really doesn't matter. The system is very self-contained. But outside of the system, that's where the big challenge is, just increasing liquidity, and that's just bringing in more collateral.
Yeah, actually, sort of an overarching question, and I sort of know the answer to this, and I sort of don't. What is the advantage to having everything be synthetic, right? You've created this sort of closed universe, which it's like the mirror dimension in Doctor Strange, right? It mirrors the real world, but isn't really the real world. But there are some advantages to being in this little AOL-like walled garden as opposed to the broader world of real assets and real crypto. Why do you want things that are synthetic? What is the advantage to that?
Well, it's really about flexibility. And I'll say this, I'll back up just one step. And we're very aware that the big problem when you're talking about a walled garden like this is just getting in and out. Yeah. So we've done quite a bit to make the experience of getting in and out easier. We've even gone so far as to have a bridge aggregator from Socket integrated right into the deposit modal. So when you go to deposit in Quenta, if you have USDC on Arbitrum, even if you have SHIB on L1, you can actually deposit directly in, and it does all that swapping in the background for you. And so that really is kind of one of the ways we're improving the user experience there. But once you're actually inside the system, it's the flexibility that it provides. So there's no, there might be a wrapped gold on Ethereum. I'm not really sure, but we don't have to worry about wrapping different assets or doing any of this stuff. All you need is an Oracle feed. So if I know the price of gold, because Chainlink and Pyth is our other Oracle provider, we use decentralized oracles. So we're actually using multiple oracles to further decentralize this, decreasing risk for everybody. And as long as Chainlink and Pyth have a feed for something, so we know the price, we can list that asset. And we can list that asset at 25x leverage. So it doesn't have to be, something that you've wrapped and gotten on chain. It can be, we've had people, suggest putting wheat and corn on chain, which it's a little bit costly to list each thing. So you need to make sure there's at least some demand. But hypothetically, this is all possible. And that's the kind of wonderful thing about it. You don't need to worry about what chain your asset's on, if it's on a chain at all. You just worry about being able to get that exposure right from Quenta.
So it's basically it's like it's sort of like the holodeck, right? If you you don't have to worry about actually getting the real items. If you can simulate the items, that's good enough for most purposes. So you're like, computer, I would like synthetic gold, please, and it just makes it for you in whatever amount you need. And that as long as you have a bead on what the price of real gold is out in the real world, it's the same thing inside the holodeck. And so I get it. So that's the flexibility of that world. Okay,
yeah,
very cool.
Exactly. Oh, and one more thing that I should mention. This hasn't really been explored under V2, but I think under V3 you're going to start seeing this a lot. Are you familiar with what Squeeth is? Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, so this is getting a little deep here, but what Squeeth is actually the price of Ethereum squared. And this is I hate that I can't remember which DAO actually created this, but it's actually out there. You can trade this right now. It's on L1, so it's very expensive. But things like this, the price of Ethereum squared, has these interesting properties where it almost trades like an option. You can use it to hedge different kinds of risk, especially like if you have like a Uniswap position or something like this. It hedges your volatility risk. So things like that are impossible to do any other way. You can't wrap Squeeth, right?
Right.
But under V3, what we'll be able to do is actually create these custom markets where it's not just the asset itself, but it's the asset along with whatever other type of logic or math you want to apply.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So I can finally so I had this idea a long time ago for something I called Bytecoin. And the idea is it's always worth 8 times whatever Bitcoin is worth, right? So, and that's just the rules, right? And I was like, well, I was trying to figure out how to do it. It's like there really is no way to do it, but you could do it using this system now because any rule, any arbitrary rule applied to any feed based price. So Bytecoin could exist. So that was my idea, people, just in case anyone does it.
Yeah, well, you know what? Under V3, you can in fact create a pool, and you can even put in your own liquidity. So yeah, that's one of the great things about the system is like I think some of the flexible options that we're going to have in the future haven't even been thought of. But it's really anything that you can imagine that has like a price and a little bit of logic applied to it. That's what you can do. And so there's just no way to get that with a wrapped asset or anything else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about the Quinta token. So how is the Quinta token used in the system?
Right now, the Quinta token's a relatively new launch. I think we launched the token in November. So it's been a few months. Yeah. And right now, the two big things that you can do with it are stake it and earn Quinta rewards. These Quinta rewards are from token emissions. So it's essentially saying that if you get the Quinta token now and you stake it, you're going to get a larger percentage of the ownership over time. Yep. And other thing that's been really popular that I've been doing a lot is getting trading rewards. So we have a percentage of emission that is directed at traders every week. And the more you stake and the more you trade, the more you get. So this is really just kind of directing a percentage of ownership at people who are using the protocol the most and have their incentives aligned. So that's kind of the initial use of the Quinta token, in addition to what a lot of other tokens are used for, governance. So you can come and vote. We use a representative system, very similar to synthetics. So you can come in before each election and you can choose who you want to make decisions on your behalf, and you can vote for them. We have a grants council that you can vote on, people who sit on the grants council that'll kind of distribute and help with marketing. And as we move into the future, this is where it gets a lot more exciting because, of course, I mentioned earlier that our relationship with synthetics included a percentage of fees. That's not live yet, so there hasn't been a ton of discussion about what to do with these fees because, we're just passing them to synthetics right now. It's purely a labor of love. But the near future, we're going to see probably quite a bit of revenue from generating what's, I think, like 99% of the volume that goes through synthetics right now. Plus, we're looking at 5% from anything we generate from Lyra options and a couple more interesting, partners that we're going to be onboarding in the next few months. So once that revenue stream comes in, then it's really going to be up to the token holders what to do with that revenue. So I would love to give you an answer for what we're doing, but it's really up to the token holders in the end. They're the people who are going to be voting on all of this. So, I'm pretty excited to see what they decide to do because it looks like we've been very successful with Perps V2. So that's going to be an ongoing discussion in the next few months.
Okay, very cool, very fascinating. Why did you guys choose to build on Optimism? And I think I know the answer to this, but I guess what I'm more interested in is, will you be moving to other chains as well? Keeping in mind that the correct answer is yes, and that Phantom is going to be coming soon.
All right.
Tell me, I actually want to hear what your thoughts are actually on the other chains and versus Optimism, and why you want Optimism first.
I think roll-ups were something that everybody in the synthetics ecosystem was excited about from the beginning. Synthetics was, I believe, the first protocol on Optimism. And so at that time, Arbitrum didn't exist. And Optimism was kind of the first team venturing into this L2 space as not a side chain, but a true L2 that uses the security of Ethereum. And I know if you're very, very familiar with kind of how these L2s work, you'll know there's still a lot of work to be done before Optimism is a true roll-up. But it's moving toward that direction. Yeah, it's moving that direction. Decentralization is a process. A lot of people think it's just this result where you come out and you're fully decentralized. It's not really how any of this works. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work to decentralize a system. And so we were really just aligned with kind of the ethos and the mission there. But of course, we don't want to be bogged down by just being limited to Optimism because there are users everywhere. So Optimism was the first place where we were able to go and get low latency, low fees, When you're trading perps, you don't want to spend $25 on a fee and have it take 15 minutes to execute the trade. Ethereum. It just doesn't work. So
not ETH.
So you have to go to a layer 2, or you have to go to another chain or a side chain. We decided to keep it as close to Ethereum as possible. And then as time goes on, we work very closely with Chainlink. And so what Chainlink is building, if you're not familiar, is something called CCIP. And CCIP is just this protocol that allows chains to talk to each other. And this becomes very, very important, because if we want to, say, deploy on Arbitrum or really any EVM chain, Ethereum virtual machine, so kind of it just means these chains are all speaking the same language, right? Once CCIP comes out, it becomes kind of trivial to go deploy the app on any of them. And the beauty of the synthetics debt pool and having a global debt pool there that's used for all our perps is that synthetics can actually use CCIP to talk to the main source of liquidity. We don't have to move it. We don't have to fragment it.
Right.
It sits right there.
Liquidity.
Mm-hmm. So
got it. That's super interesting. So you'll have unified liquidity across BNB, even Ethereum if you wanted it, but all EVM chains, like, very quickly. That is super interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and there are some constraints, like you're talking probably the first place we're going to move to is Arbitrum, just because it's another roll up. Polygon's another great choice to move to, but it just allows users to essentially be there wherever they prefer to be, execute a trade, and then everything is happening still on Optimism. So we don't have to move. You don't have to come over. You're just allowed to execute the trade wherever you want to be. And that's the beautiful thing that CCIP is going to do for us. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, of course, as a front end provider, we want to be as many places as possible. And in fact, we actually are on Arbitrum already, but you can't trade perps there. What you can do is you can go trade options. And Lyra actually has deployed on Arbitrum. It's a little bit different. So if you go over and you use Lyra options on Arbitrum through our Quinta options interface, you're going to use USDC instead of SUSD. I personally prefer SUSD, but if you want to go over to Arbitrum, you can do this. And they're using their pool's delta hedge. So, they're actually taking short positions in order to hedge their long exposure for the pool. Traders don't really need to think about this, but what it means is lower fees, and they're using GMX in order to do this, since synthetics isn't over there. I assume they're going to be using synthetics once synthetics moves over, because frankly the fees are just lower and the number of assets you can offer are lower at this point. So it's kind of a no-brainer choice, but right now it's just not available.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, look, our 40 minutes are almost up, but before we go, I want to ask you a couple other quick questions. So current events. So Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, Silvergate. We're seeing, even before all that stuff started happening, we started to see, what people call Operation Choke Point happen here in the U.S., where, it looks like the fiat on-ramps in and out of crypto are drying up real fast. And Silvergate and Signature famously were the two big crypto banks. Silicon Valley Bank, not so much, but those two, yeah, for sure. Now that those two are, off the table, what do you think about that? Do you think there's a real danger in the United States that we could be headed to a place where there are no fiat on and off ramps out of crypto? A, and B, does that matter? What does the rest of the world think about that, even if we lose our ramps?
I'll start with does it matter? I wish it didn't matter. I think at some point it's not going to matter. But one of the benefits of using crypto is that when you're inside crypto, you can swap any asset you want, whether it's, going to an exchange and swapping Bitcoin for Ethereum, or when you're within Ethereum swapping on Uniswap. It's so easy to move between chains and assets. And so I see kind of the traditional world as very similar. You want it to be really easy and seamless to move between, and it's going to be really difficult for people if you can't, because I still have to pay a mortgage with USD in my bank
Right.
account. So I would love to be able to say, you know what, I'm not using a bank at all anymore. Screw this. But people just don't really have that luxury. So good on you if you do. But most people don't have this luxury. That being said, I'm not too concerned that we're going to completely lose access to banking, because unless it's explicitly illegal, I think somebody will step in to fill this need. Now, if the person that steps in to fill this need is Wells Fargo,
Yeah.
that's is going to make Wells Fargo a lot of money. But I guess I'm not really concerned that we're going to completely lose access to banking. I think on some level, as much as it seems like the government is really trying to crack down and kind of be a little forceful about regulation and regulate by action and not legislation. I think in general, everybody's kind of aware that the digital world is kind of the up and coming world. Digital assets are here to stay. And at some point, somebody is going to step in and offer services for people. And personally, I use Opolis as my only real on-ramp. That and I don't know if you've used like Crypto Refill or BitPay, where you can get MasterCard gift cards and all this kind of stuff. Those are my main on and off ramps. I use Opolis to get money into my bank account. They're a great service if you work in crypto. And I haven't noticed any service disruptions, so it's not really top of mind for me, but it is something I'm paying attention to. But yeah, I just really think it's hard for me to imagine that even if these banks go down, nobody's willing to step in and serve this market unless there's an explicit reason why they can't, like some kind of legal action from the legislature.
Yeah, that seems to be what all the big cerebellums around me are saying, and I've asked this question of a lot of people that are far smarter than I am. And the sort of consensus is it's sort of stupid and amazing that the government is, resisting all of this as much as they are, but ultimately they can't resist it fully, because this is, it's like resisting the internet. Like at some point, it's just you're gonna have to say yes to it. You're gonna have to bend like a reed in the wind, or it's just gonna mow you over. So I think at some point they will realize that, but I don't know how long it's going to take them to wake up. The good news, what's sort of heartening to me, is I'm seeing in Congress, there are new faces and new people and new hearings. Like, is there a coordinated action trying to take down crypto? Is it, is there a conspiracy effectively to kill crypto in the government? Regardless of what you think about that, the fact that hearing even exists in this new Congress is very heartening. And there's a lot of people now that seem to me to be a lot smarter and a lot more pro-crypto than there were before. So fingers are crossed as we get through this period. So
yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of ups and downs in the industry already. So this won't be the last time that we have a scare or some hard times. But I think if we all kind of stick to what we're doing, and hopefully moving into the next bull run, there's like a little bit less obvious crime. I think everybody.
Well, we burned
else
out all the bad people. I think that's the good news. Is that
we should hope.
I think we got them all, and that is the good news. So fingers are crossed for a brighter tomorrow. Burt, you have been a great guest. This has been absolutely fascinating. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.